get into specific things here, there are a number of people who have some information that they want to share, and I'll start with Cindy Robichaud has some information to share with this assignment.
I'm doing my plug first for the Kent branch. We have some flyers that are on the back table, so feel free to pick yourself up one. It's just outlining basically what they have at the Kent branch, some of their programming, some of the meetings and some of the things that we have. There's also information flyer back there. That's our library, our collection that's housed in the second floor of the Chatham Public Library. So feel free to take one of those too. Like I say, it was just more of an information. Jim alluded to the OGS going more digital. If you're an OGS member, OGS is offering webinars to their members, and that's a great perk. And if you're an OGS member right now and you're not joining the webinars, you're missing out. They have one webinar a month, and it's a variety of different topics. Last month was an awesome presentation. It was something, I don't remember the exact title, but it was new clues from old headstones. The speaker was fantastic. So there is a complete 2014 list of what all the webinars are going to be back there too, so you can grab some of them on your way out. Magic?
Thanks very much, Cindy. Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Honor. I am Director of Region 1 for less than a month more to go. So this is my last meeting that I will be a Director of OGS. I've come tonight basically to fill you in on some of the things that are going on. I put a few bookmarks at the back, and they are to remind you to help us register the Ontario cemeteries. Not all cemeteries are registered with the government, and we've been in a big battle with them for quite a few years because we have been transcribing the cemeteries and we've been sending them off to them, and they haven't been adding them to our list. Shirley Sturdivant, who's our president, has been doing an awesome job connecting with the government, and letters back and forth and emails and phone calls, and they are now starting to realize, especially because of GPS, they thought a lot of our cemeteries were duplicated, the names were duplicated, and they're now recognizing that they weren't duplicated because the GPS numbers are different locations. So they are now starting to put them on. The other thing about one part of the government is not the only part that has to do with registering cemeteries. There's another part of the government that helps with registering the cemeteries. So it's not just the registrar that does it, but it's also the archives. And you have to have that cemetery on both lists. The people who are building all these brand new condominiums and things like that want to take up the cemetery spaces for their projects are now looking at the lists on the government because they don't want to be digging up bodies, because that slows down their amount of money that they're able to make as quickly as possible. So they're now looking at this list a lot more carefully than what they used to. So kudos to OGS for working on this so hard. The OHS is also a part of working on the cemeteries, I believe, too. But it's a big project with OGS. How many of you have looked at the 1921 census on Ancestry? Okay. There have been a few complaints about the 1921 census saying that there are pages where the names of the people are missing. Has anybody found any pages like that? The OGS has told this to Stats Canada, and they want to know the exact pages where these are missing. To let you know, all census records up to 2006 have been either digitized or microfilmed, and the originals are now destroyed. So if they didn't microfilm them, or they didn't digitize them correctly, they're gone. They can't do it over. But if there are problems between what Ancestry has and what is the original document, Stats Canada thinks there were no mistakes, but we are hearing these rumors. So what OGS would like, if anybody has any pages where they think their family members' names are not listed, please email, call, or write to the OGS provincial office. Give them that information so that the Stats Canada can check with Ancestry as well. Someone at the Kent branch said that the pages that he was looking on Ancestry, the names were very faint, very difficult to read. And what he did was he went to the original documents that he could find on the government page, and they were a better copy. So if you can't read it too well on Ancestry, go to the free version that, well, both of them are free, because Ancestry has said that their 1921 census is free. Go to the free one that's on the government website and check to see if you can read it better on that one. So there are 2 spots to check. Yes?
Are you saying it's not enough to make the correction on Ancestry.com?
They might, Ancestry doesn't always work that quickly. So check with the
They
government.
immediately. I made some corrections and they showed up on my screen immediately.
They showed up on your screen, but they don't always show up, they don't always make the corrections in the microfilm,
Oh, no.
the actual copy. Okay? It's not the name page that they've got, this is the actual census picture that we're worried about.
That can
Okay.
be changed?
Or if they've digitized it the wrong way off of the microfilm, it might just need to be redigitized for that page, is what we're hoping. If it can't be changed, then if it's from the original paper and they've microfilmed it without those names on it, because if they didn't check it properly, then that's lost. But this is one of the problems that we've heard about, that people have complained. So we're just checking with any branch member who knows of anything like this, or anybody who's not a branch member. If you find a page like that when you're doing research, please contact the OGS and let them know the exact page, the township, the county, and OGS will contact Stats Canada and give them the information. Yes?
So you said just go to like www.statscanada?
No, not Stats Canada, it'd be on, LAC, Libraries and Archives Canada.
Collections Canada,
It's called Collections Canada now?
but the LCS, Library Archives Canada, is collectionscanada.ca.
Okay. I know at one point, just lately, they've been switching their webpage to a new one.
So it's just collectionscanada.ca? That's it?
That's what it was the last time I used it.
Okay.
If you go to Google and put in Libraries and Archives Canada, it'll come up.
Okay, thank you.
And there's an awful lot of information on that website that's for free, and it's excellent. It's just finding it sometimes it's difficult to find it. I will no longer be a director because they are changing the way the governing body is going to be run. Instead of having regional directors, I'll start at the beginning. Years ago, when OGS first started, it was just out of Toronto. It was a group that started in Toronto to do family history together. And then other groups in other parts of the province decided they wanted to be part of this family history group. So they started up the whole Ontario Genealogical Society, and each county had its own branch so that you could actually get to a branch. It's difficult for people from Windsor to get to Toronto every month for a meeting. And in those days, there were no computers. So then it became a problem because we had 30 branches, and all of the branch chairs were supposed to go to the meeting in Toronto. Well, that became very difficult by paying, and also by getting all those people a chance to talk. So they decided instead they would go to these regional directors, and they worked with the tourism regions. So our region is Region 1. We've got Kent, Essex, and Lambton. And so we cut down on the number of directors that would have to go. So each region would vote on somebody to be the director for that area to go up. Now we've come to the point where the directors need to have a specific job, a skill. so that we can move forward into this new age of doing genealogy, because things have really changed. So they've asked for people who are good at communications, people who are good at computers, people who are good at other skills. And we had an application form to fill out. We've had people apply. It'll now be either 4 to 6 directors. We had 6 people apply. And if you're an OGS member, those names have been put into the news leaf. Alan Campbell, who is from Lambton County, will be our new president. Patty, and I can't pronounce her last name, she's from Ottawa. She is one of our former directors. She will be vice president. And there are 4 other people who have put their names in, and they've all got specialized skills. And it is marvelous. Shirley is so happy. Oh, we've got somebody to do this. Oh, we've got somebody to do that now. And so this is what the changes are. So I didn't put my name in. And so in May, the first weekend in May, when we have the OGS conference, that is when these people will take over their positions. I'm sure they'll be acclaimed. I doubt if anybody new will come up to join us. We know what happens in groups. So I just wanted to let you realize this is what's going on. This way, we've got people in the group who can help with a lot of the things at the provincial level that need to be dealt with. And it's not, the directors are not just a group of people who vote and say yes or no to whatever the executive is doing. They will all be a part of the executive. They will meet at all the same meetings. There won't be an executive meeting one month and then a board meeting the next month. They are a part of the whole group. So that's the way the OGS is moving, and I hope to see lots of new things coming up with what they're doing. Are there any questions about OGS? Okay, yes?
Is there staff?
Staff? Yes, we have some part-time staff members that are paid, and one covers membership, one's the receptionist. We have a Sarah Newitt, who is the executive director. She's a paid member as well. But anybody who is on the board are all volunteers. The only pay that I got was my mileage for going to any of the 3 branches once a year for an executive meeting and once a year for a branch meeting. That was all that a director was given. I was a volunteer. And that's what we need, is a lot of volunteers, because that's what our whole group is about volunteering. So, you know, if you're a member of the branch, please help us with any projects, or help the OGS with any projects, because some of the things the OGS asks for are not jobs that have to continue on forever. There are some that have a time limit. Yes?
Do you have to be a member to volunteer?
You're supposed to be a member to be a part of the group. It's like any other society. Like, if you're a member, you get a lot more perks than if you're not a member. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Debbie. And could we have a round of applause for Debbie? Did it extremely well, and we certainly are going to miss her for sure. Thanks, Debbie. Okay, speaking of things that we're trying to do differently with the digital age, we've talked about volunteers, looking for volunteers. If you are interested, please, speak to one of the members of the executive, myself, Debbie, or anyone else here tonight who is a member of the executive, and offer your services. We would very much welcome you to be part of either an ongoing project or a short-term project. We've got lots of things to have people contribute to. One of which is we're trying to build, as I said, the membership, trying to build the involvement of OGS Essex County. And one of the things that we've done to try and do that is this poster, this banner that we have here. That's just been completed, and this will be on display at various places where the OGS Essex branch will be involved at to county fairs, various other places where we'll set up a booth to talk to people about family history. So I think this has been a wonderful poster. Cindy Robichaud headed up the production of this, and congratulations, Cindy. It turned out extremely well. So we're trying to get ourselves up there in as many ways as possible. One of the other things that I think is important is that another project we started this spring is that there are a lot of local areas, local resources available specifically for people who are doing family history research. And so what we decided to do at the meetings this spring is to invite representatives from these different resource centers, if you wish, to come and speak very briefly, sort of an overview of what their resource center offers to people who are looking for information about family history. And tonight, we're very pleased to have Margaret, I'm not sure the last name, sorry. Thank you, Margaret. Come and talk about something that certainly is significant to a large number of people in Essex Branch, and that's French language roots. So she will be talking a little bit about the French Language Genealogy Center and tell you where it is, how to get there, what resources they have, and if that in fact might be something that your family or some people that you know are interested in, they can take advantage of for sure. Margaret?
Thank you. Do we have anybody here that does French research? Yay, good.
Over here too.
And over here too. Any of the names? I know Cindy's.
Deroche, Roche, and Chagrin.
Great, very good. Okay, Society Franco-Ontarian of History and Genealogy. If you notice, I didn't say it in French. I have French ancestry, but I do not speak French. So it's not that hard to research in French, but we're going to go through some of this. SFOG, as we call it, it's an organization much like the OGS. It has its mission statement. It was the first nonprofit French charter first charter in French in Ontario, and its mission was to develop and implement services and develop research centers and publications, document and directories for parishes, cemeteries, organize meetings, events, encourage sharing as we're doing tonight, and new technologies as they become available. So, that in January of 2014, we had 8 regional offices across Canada and 4 independents. In the independents, you have to, I hope I'm pushing the right thing. The independents are Kapuskasing, Sudbury, Hawkesbury, and Cornwall. To get to their libraries, you have to pay. You can be access to them, but you have to pay to go into them. And of course, here, the one that I'm going to talk about is our Windsor, Essex. And it's the pioneers of the Southwest, or the Southwest pioneers. Originally, our little logo was Champlain. Champlain always had wanted to come down this far into Ontario, and he never did. But he had sent, well, I better not go too far. Anyway, the French Center. It's been in Windsor since, well, actually about 1981, and I think they did their first few meetings in houses. I don't know if anybody here remembers that, but I know that a lot of the seasoned researchers remember going to Bell River, above St. Simon, St. Jude Church Hall, and you climbed up this long, long, narrow, we lost a lot of folks because we couldn't go up those stairs. But anyway, they were there until they moved to Puce in 2008. The Roman Catholic Church, if you don't have any French connection, find one or do it for somebody else because it's great. They have so much. The French Catholic priests recorded baptismals and deaths and marriages in French and Latin, both. And it really doesn't take a lot of vocabulary to understand every one of the documents because they're all standardized records. The priest did it the same way every time. I think the biggest problem is the naming practices, such as dit names. I understand that you did a dit name speaker one night and it was sold out because the dit names they're interesting. And also the anglicization of the French names. So let's see what else. Okay, I'm starting with the Ontario repertoires. We have a lot of marriages, deaths, and some baptismals. The baptismal ones are kind of hard to get, but we do have a lot of them. This whole wall is got all these Ontario repertoires. The red dot is how you find them. We've got a cheat sheet on the end, and it gives a list of all the maps, and it tells you what parish, and it's numbered. So that's how you find that. And it's a secondary source, though. It is a secondary source, but it's copied detail from primary or original documents like marriages, etc. Usually the parents are there. This is the nice thing about doing French. The priest always put in the mother and father of both sides, and it's really easy to link previous generations. So, the other one we have is the Quebec repertoires. Quebec is divided into 15 regions. Then we take those regions and we number them, and we put all those blue dots, that's Quebec, and the parish registers are arranged by region and number. And it's really a very valuable resource. But again, I know it is transcribed, so it makes it a secondary source. But what a roadmap. To follow this roadmap and then go back to Druin, which I've never been on Ancestry, can you believe that? Everybody's going to cut my tongue out for family. But you can check, and then you can pull off those rings. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead. Anyway, dictionaries. Dictionaries are a gift. When you're researching in the French Center, somebody's always saying, well, what did Tom Gay say? What is Jete saying? This is our dictionaries. Our dictionaries, the first one was our granddaddy, the Father Tom Gay, published in 1871 to 1890. And he has 7 volumes. The first volume is the original immigrants coming to Canada. And, but it's really neat to see the old French names and having find your grandfather's marriage certificate. And here it's, who's one of the big fellows that came in and signed things? Oh, I just had a senior moment. Anyway, we'll move along. He transcribed all the vital records from the beginning of the colony, and that first volume is the original or immigrants. 7 volumes, 6 remaining are the succeeding generations. The 7th volume has over 100 pages of surname variations and dit names. A lot of mistakes in this work, a lot. But it's really valuable to researchers. The red Druin. The red Druin is simply because it has the red cover. And the other thing is that the Druin Institute researched these pedigrees for pay. So you know what's going to happen there. Somebody's going to say pump up there. There's not going to be any illegitimate grandmas in there. It's going to be all the... And the blue Druin. Now, the blue Druin is very rare. I think there was 18 copies made, and I'm not going to tell you how much we paid for it because it was a ridiculous amount. It's a marriage-only dictionary, and it's indexed by both male and female. The years are 1760 to 1935. You can't photocopy from this book. You can only take out anything on a pencil because we don't want books damaged. Let me see what else it says over here. 18 sets were printed, and only a few are accessible to the public. And Petit Druin is the corrections and additions of the blue Druin, and Jete. Jete is by far none the best. It is the most valuable. It contains a few errors, but not very many. It is the big blue Bible. It's and it usually can take you back to France. The only thing is, You gotta get up to 1730, which you gotta do a little bit of legwork. But once you get there, you're on your way. Now, PRDH. PRDH is a program of research in historical demography of the University of Montreal. A couple of fellows were working in the archives in Montreal at the university, and they started collecting and making all of these records. And then it is now a source for records from the mother colony to 1799. The Society, the French Center in Pew, has the database on CD-ROM and the book format. The CD-ROM is great. You just put it into the computer and you type in the names and it comes up, and it really is marvelous. But again, it's a secondary source. It's an extremely valuable resource, and we also have the book format, but no one knows how to read it. We can't figure out quite how to, so it kind of sits on the back shelf. But the database is terrific. And Acadia. We have a very small but valuable collection of Acadian dictionaries and parish registers. Beau Arsenault, his is good, but the best one is Stephen White's Dictionary of Family Acadians. Stephen White was probably originally Etienne LeBlanc. He ended up being Stephen White. United States. We have New England and the New England captives. We have Michigan. We have a lot of things from Michigan. The early census, the records. Louisiana, we had quite a connection from this area with the fur traders down into Louisiana. So that's a good collection. One of our gems is Amity Emery. Does anybody know Amity? I bet you would know him. He's from Vancouver. He was a local researcher and was very, very well respected. And we were really lucky. Unfortunately, we had to lose him, but we ended up getting a number of his family history files. And but with Amity, he left us, upon his death, the center received his research and the majority of his research books, and the center has his filing cabinet as he left it, with all his letters and correspondence and everything. Sometimes you really do find some gems in there. That's if you've got a French ancestor. But remember what I told you, you've got to find somebody that, if you don't have one. Okay. The Druin Institute microfilms. Mark Drulard is one terrific guy. He does a lot of volunteer work for us. He purchased all of these Druin Institute microfilms, just the very same ones that you get on Ancestry. He purchased them and has put them on loan at the center indefinitely, so it's on permanent loan. It is my understanding, because I've got to make sure I say this right, it is my understanding that most of the Druin microfilms are copies of the original registers. You should be aware of what you're looking at, though, because among those originals, Mark has advised me that sometimes they have put in, they've also taken the microfilmed the transcriptions. Somebody's transcribed some, so they did the original and they did the transcriptions too. And in the transcriptions, there's errors. There's probably some errors in the originals too, but that we can't change. So that's, oh yes, and Suzanne Somerville, according to her, the Druin Institute microfilmed the original registers of St. Anne's, as well as some transcriptions. So you need to know what you're looking at even when you're looking at the original source. And of course, we have all the local Catholic parish repertoires. I wish I had them listed here. I tried to, by when the church became like St. Anne Detroit was the first, and then Windsor, of course, and St. Peter's on the Thames. So we have it appears that you can get, if you get to 1799, then you have it made, because then those dictionaries kick in. They should be found in the local parish repertoires, and these are transcribed repertoires, again, secondary sources, but believe me, these books are so well worn, some of them are thin from what they've been used, and any errors have been corrected over the years by the local researchers. The most are available by purchase. We have most of them drew in microfilms for each local parish. And just recently, Mark Drulard and a team that he has put together has done River Canard. He's just almost ready to publish St. Peter's on the Thames. He has also done, I can't believe how much work he does. He did St. Joseph in Chatham. He did the burials, the marriages, and the baptismals. And I said he's working on St. Peter's. We also did St. Rose de Lima in Riverside, Windsor, which is kind of nice. It's not as complete because they closed that church down in 1931 to 2008. The only thing is that it isn't completely done. All of the names were not in this, but at least it's something because the church is now closed. Anyway, a local dictionary. Has anybody heard of the Father Denison? Oh, well, there you are. Father Denison, he's the genealogy of the French families of the Detroit River region. Some of Father Denison's work relies on Tanguay. Remember, Tanguay made all those errors. In particular, the older records. Consequently, he has a number of errors. And it was revised in 1987, but some errors still remain. Denison anglicized all the first names, so Pierre became Peter and Etienne became Stephen. And Denison is a good roadmap, but you really do need to verify the records. But you need to do that with any secondary source. The local transcribed parish records will lead you to the families found in Denison, and for all its mistakes, it's my favorite book. My whole family is in there on my father's side. It's just terrific. And then they take you back to Quebec and the original, and then on to France. The other most valuable book for Windsorites is Father La Jeunesse, the Windsor Border region. Without question, and it was reprinted last year, the year before. Okay, local secondary. Linda Knepp is entering birth notices. And since 1980 to present, from the local newspapers, our volunteers have clipped a variety of events from family reunions to pictures of generations, and the clippings are held in a binder. I have a cousin, a distant cousin that found me, and she lives out in Alberta, and every once in a while she sends me something. Well, I found in her family name a Cecile, her mom, as a toddler. I photocopied it and sent it. It was just in this picture of this child in one of the Cecile books. She has never seen it. It was her mom. And so it was really, there is such surprises because of these things that we've just collected over the years. And of course, the Star obituaries are in binders from 1976 to the present, and are on CD up to 2013. Okay, projects. This couple, they revised the St. Joachim Church Register, and they put in the marriage and deaths and added parents and spouses and children. They created their own dictionary, really. And genealogies. Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting, but what you just showed us, was that beside the register that your Franco-Ontarian Society printed a number of years ago on St. Joachim, this is a second?
This is a revision of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the revision. Most of I believe the OGS has probably all of our publications. But Mark is doing River Canard, and Claire Grund did St. Rose. So they're picking away at updating everything and fixing the mistakes. We don't make mistakes, do we? Anyway, genealogies, that whole wall. If you did your genealogy and then come back and made a copy and left it at the center, it's incredible. Sometimes you don't have to maybe do as much work as you think you have because it's already been done. Over 600 local French-Canadian families have donated a copy of their family history. Some are sophisticated, hardcover to pictures, and then some are just a few pages. Sometimes you find stuff in that too. History. we have a number of history books, Canadian history, provinces, counties, numerous local townships, churches, Daughters of the King, and we have all, and our French Canadian ancestors, those biographies, even if they're just kind of fun to read. And the Dictionary of Canadian Biography, the complete set in both French and English. Now, notarial records. The notarial records are for the more advanced researcher. It goes beyond your marriages and baptismals. And the notarial legal records are varied from marriage contracts, wills, deeds, but the ones I like best are those engaged contracts from the fur trade. I don't speak or write French, and it didn't take me long to know that to engage west meant my ancestor had a contract to go west to Michilimackinac or to Fort Pontchartrain of Detroit, of Lake Erie, that kind of thing. And we have these two sets. I'm not even going to try to, they're inventories of contracts. Antoine Roy put out one, and this fellow Lapallier, his work is really excellent. Here I keep talking about how much money we spent on some of those, but we did. That was a very expensive, small little grouping in there. And we have a number of American members, and all three of them have Ancestry.ca. They research the French Center at Puce Monthly. They go to Burton historically. And the reason is the Blue Druin and the notarial records, that's the big draw. That's what they come for. And computers. The center has two computers that have full Ancestry.ca access, plus the PRDH, the demographic. And we have scanners and 6 workstations, plus 2 stations wired for laptops, etc., etc. We have this wall. People keep coming in with pictures of, they don't know who they are. So we put them up there, and it was good to make the screen, so that's why that's there. We have a photocopier that does beautiful color prints as well. 25 cents for black and white, and 50 for the color. Microfilm reader, laminator at cost, a book finder at cost, microwave and fridge, and free parking. And sometimes if you're really lucky, all the ladies have brought in some food, so you get free lunch too. You don't bring it. Now, if you're a member, we have the SPOG, the Virtual Online Library. The membership, a network that includes members-only section when you go on to the Virtual Online Library, except for those 4, and I'm not sure if they're still on there or not, but there you would have to pay some kind of it's not a big fee though, I don't think. And as a member, a network that would include 1,400 amateur genealogists, visitation access to any of the other 8 participating centers, use of all online research tools for the member only. I see what I was telling myself. Last and definitely not least, but a wonderful facility affording you the means to express pride in your French Ontarian heritage. Annual membership fee is $35, $60 for 2 years. A trial visit, $5, and that grants access to everything that we have at the center. And there is but this would be difficult for most people, but we have La Cheneau, which is I'm going to let you pass it around. It's all in French, but what a quality magazine. It really makes me mad that I can't speak French or read it. But they do a really good job on that. Okay, location. EC Road takes you into Puce, and on your left-hand side is the old Puce Public School, and that's our address and our hours. And I have some cards, I'll leave them at the back if anybody wants to pick that up. And yes, when I was talking about other stuff, I wanted to mention something that I forgot. We have a lot of Irish stuff, and we've got a growing native section collection, but it's those Irish things that might be of interest to some of you that are looking for that elusive Irish marriage or death certificate because of the Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, you could pop in and take a look at the Irish stuff if you were interested in doing that. I should have. Volunteers, as we all talk about volunteers, that's our most valuable resource, no question. And I don't even have them all on here in this picture. Of course, you can't get, I had to take pictures when no one was really aware of what I was doing. But there they are. Annette Robert, Jacqueline, Agathe, Joanne, and Juliet, and of course, Mark Joulard and Charles Liebert, and me. And thank you for inviting us to speak. We really were pleased that you did that. Questions?
I just wanted you to run back so that we copy down your access, email access.
It's right here. It's, yep, I'm gonna put them out here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think that's it.
I have a comment.
Yes.
On the Drouin,
Yes.
if you are Anglophone, if you have people who are English in Quebec, you would check the Drouin as well, because there are some of the Anglican church records also microfilmed by the
Yeah.
Drouin.
Yep.
So if you don't have the French, but they lived in Quebec, you might be able to find them in there as well.
We don't have any of the Anglophone microfilms at the center, but yes, you're right. Let me use it.
Margaret, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Very informative, and members here, certainly with the French connection particularly, will be taking advantage of this opportunity.
Yes.
So it gives one more resource center for
And
people to
also
research.
the Irish. I wish I had written down more of what our Irish collection is that we have, and that's hard to find the Irish too.
The Windsor Public Library also has microfilm of the Drouin that the OGS donated to them. And we also included the French forts down in Michigan and Ohio and Illinois. So those are available as well.
Yep, we have some of those too. That's
Thank
right.
you very much, Margaret.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. As I mentioned, we're fortunate to have with us tonight Heather Colautti, who is the registrar of the Windsor Community Museum, and very well qualified to talk about this issue, which seems to be fairly prominent these days. What do you do with the stuff in Grandma's closet, kind of thing, and how do you keep it from in a condition which is worthy of preservation? So, Heather, thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to say I actually got my start in the entire museum history world at an OGS branch in Oxford County. It was sort of my first history job, was working in the office. So it's sort of because of the OGS that I've moved along this path. I did my BA in history at university in Nova Scotia, St. Francis Xavier. And then afterwards I was like, what do you do with a history degree? I didn't want to teach, so my grandmother, who was a membership person with the OGS in Oxford County, said, well, your cousin, he works at a museum. Maybe you should do that. So I went to Algonquin College and did museum studies there. And unlike some of the other programs that you can do with museum studies, Algonquin is very hands-on. We had a conservation class, and we even took chemistry class, so you get right down to the roots of what you're doing and how it affects the artifact. I don't remember half that, so don't worry, I won't be getting into chemistry tonight. There are a lot of books, and the museum even owns some of them, that were very popular in, let's say, the 80s and 90s, that really showed you how to put your artifact back to the way it was. I have to say that in the museum, we really don't think that way. Our main goal is to make sure that no further damage is going to happen, and just to preserve it the way it is. Very rarely, sometimes when we put something on display, we'll make it look nice again. But for most cases, We just try to stop it from going any further into decay and preserve it and try to retain any information that it might have in regards to maker's marks and that sort of thing. So that's our sort of way of thinking, and so that's what I'm hoping to share with you tonight. So I guess our main thing is preventative conservation, and anything that's more invasive, we leave to professionals. So the sort of general ideas that we deal with is that most of the things we do, we try to make sure that they're reversible. So when we number things, and of course everything in the museum has a number, we try to make sure that that's reversible. We use a lacquer that we know can come off with acetone. When we use glue, we use a water-soluble glue. When we do encapsulation, it's reversible. Mainly this is because, as I said, we want to preserve the artifact the way it is. But we're also very well aware of technology is changing, and in 10, 15 years, they could have a much better way of dealing with things. And that way, we can stop the way we're doing it, we can go back, remove it, redo it in a more friendly way to the artifact. So everything we try to handle with gloves. Obviously, you handle fragile things as least often as possible. And for us in the museum, and it's not a bad idea either for you, is whenever you do treat an artifact, take a before picture, take an after picture, take in between pictures. We do it just so you can document if you've lost any information or any maker's marks, you've at least preserved them in your before pictures. If you have to run to someone and say, I really screwed up, you have documentation of how you screwed up. So this is some of the stuff we do. And of course, there are 3 things that are the easiest way to look after your artifacts. And temperature and humidity are the easiest ways that you can work with trying to keep your artifacts and documents safe. These 2 pieces of equipment are ones that we use in the museum. They're probably a bit beyond what you need in your average house, but the one on the left is a hygrothermograph, so it plots with a pen and ink on a drum the temperature and humidity. The other one is a digital format, does the same thing. You then hook it up to a computer, it'll plot the temperature and humidity. The main thing though is, like your home, our museum has what we call a mixed collection. You don't just have one type of thing. Because every type of material obviously has its ideals for temperature and humidity. But no one just has a room full of silver, a room full of textiles, a room full of china. It's just not practical. So for a mixed collection, we keep relative humidity, 45 to 55% relative humidity. Temperature, 68, 70, average room temperature, right? The key though, the situation is to avoid massive fluctuations in a short amount of time. When you have in a day, in a 24-hour period, a fluctuation of 10% relative humidity and then back down again, and temperatures that are widely varying, those are when you start having issues. Gradual, if you have to change the temperature and humidity, gradual, right? In most of our houses, we have air conditioning now. And really, this isn't an issue as much as it would have been in the past. The other thing that we deal with in the museum is light. Light, as we know, affects, it fades. It causes the temperature to increase as well. And so this is one of the monitors we use. So for UV, if this reads 10 microwatts per lumen when we do a reading, then whatever the light source is needs a filter. So we filter, all of our windows have a film on them so that the light is filtered. All of our fluorescent lights, which is one of the worst culprits of UV in homes, they all have filters. You can buy filters for the fluorescent tubes. I'm not sure about the modern bulbs, but I'm sure there's some sort of cover that you can do for them as well. And then the other type of light that we measure is the visible light, and that's measured in lux. And so, just to give you an example, normal daylight, not in direct sun, is about 10,000 lux. Sensitive artifacts, such as silk and paper, should be 50 lux. So, I mean, that's quite the difference. So we make sure we have very low wattage bulbs, not having light in, obviously, directly at artifacts. We try to keep in our storage area lights off as much as possible. Everything that's on display in the museum, before we ever open the exhibit, has this light meter held in front of it, and we measure it and then readjust everything. I don't know how practical that is in your own home, except for if you remember, I need to keep this out of direct sunlight, I need to keep this out of direct fluorescent light, just to be conscious and aware that light is one of those damaging factors. Now, so we're going to go through a few different types of artifacts. So first off, wood furniture. Obviously, some of the damage you see with wood furniture is cracking because of dryness, veneers that are coming off. This one cabinet we just had about 10 years ago, the veneer reapplied to it because it started to remove itself. Varnishes and variphanes, they become cracked, they yellow, they become dirty. And I mean, these are things that we usually send to professional conservators. We sent that cabinet, our Bobby cabinet, to a conservator. But generally, wood artifacts need to be taken care of. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this commercial product and commercial products like that. And generally, these aerosol products shouldn't be used on really important antiques that you have. They tend to often be dust attractors, contrary to what you sort of think. They're dust magnets. They can leave a residue, often a silicone residue on your objects and your wooden furniture. And if you're attached to these type of products, the way to use them is obviously to spray onto a cloth rather than spraying onto your product. That way you have a lot more control over what's going onto your wood furniture. And with most of the things that I'll talk about tonight, work in small areas, see how it reacts before you move on to doing big washes of the entire thing. The other thing is you can just barely wet a damp cloth with just water and it will dust just as well. The other thing is they have these new things called magnet cloths. They're actually not bad because they have no product on them. They're just sort of a lid-free cloth. The one thing I have had issues with them is if your piece of wood is the slightest bit fragile and there might be chips or raised bits, is it can catch. And so great care has to be taken with making sure that any fabric that you do use does not catch onto your wooden pieces.
Would you suggest like water as opposed to something?
Yes, yeah, just lightly wash, wet a cloth. Yeah, and then immediately dry it following. And again, working in small areas. And just as well. And if you do have a small repair that you feel you want to take care of on your own in a wood piece. Again, use water-soluble glue so that it can be reversed should there be some issue. And for large repairs, a conservator is recommended. In regards to ceramics and glass, there is such a wide variety of issues that you can have with ceramics and glass. Glass in particular, really old, unstable glasses. It can weep on its own. It can become unstable, and different soluble salts can come out of the glass, and actually it becomes wet on its own accord. Most people don't have to worry about that. And you're dealing with, grandma's china or grandma's glasses that are much more stable than, older stuff. Again, handle with gloves, but you can get cotton gloves, white cotton gloves that have like rubber dots on them, because obviously these are very slippery items. And so to handle them with care. You can remove loose dirt with a very soft bristle brush to get the majority of it off. And then with most of our treatments, when we do wash something, we prefer distilled water, so you're not introducing any minerals into the artifact. Distilled water, pure water, lukewarm or colder with no detergents in it can be used to wash. If you put a cloth or a towel in the basin that you're going to wash in, then it gives a bit of extra padding for these fragile items. And then air dry them. Don't force them to, with a hair dryer or anything like that. Now, the sort of aside to this is you shouldn't submerge anything that is obviously porous when it comes to ceramics. Unglazed pieces of pottery, if the glaze happens to be flaking off, these are not things that you should be submersing in the water, but you can, again, take a lightly damped cloth and wash them off. And again, working in small areas. So, as I said, in the museum, we often don't repair things unless they're going on display. We store things, you'll see there's a cutout in the foam. It's on a tray, it's sort of supported, it's not going to shake or rattle, and the lids of teapots are stored separately. And we'll repair this if and when we put it back on display with a water-soluble glue. And the other thing with ceramics and pottery and stuff like this is you shouldn't stack them unless they're designed to be stacked. For example, a cup and saucer are designed to be stacked. For example, I received a whole set of dishes for my great-grandmother. This was before I had any knowledge at all of what I was supposed to do or not supposed to do. And I just left the plate stacked on top of a platter. Of course, the platter, not designed to support the weight of all those plates, cracked and broke. It's not always ideal in a home setting to be able to spread things out the way we do at the museum, but just to be conscious of how what you're putting on top of something else is going to affect the piece on the bottom. And then also to be aware of, you may know your piece, but if it's been sitting there for years and you haven't touched it, try to hold it by the bottom. Don't pick it up by the spout of the teapot or the handle of the teapot. Those things are the first pieces to break, and if you hold it by the bottom, there's less likelihood that those are going to break off as you're lifting it up. I guess the rule of thumb when it comes to these type of pieces is overestimate the brittleness, underestimate their strength in everything you do in regards to them. Now, I'm sure most of you don't have iron necessarily in your collection, but you never know. Obviously, we have cannonballs and shots in our collection, and anchors. The one thing to note with these is everyone knows they rust, and they rust easily. So you obviously have to be very aware of the humidity that these are in, the environments that they're in. We have the benefit of this anchor has been treated with something called a tannic acid treatment. So it has put essentially a coating on it that's going to take longer for it to be affected by humidity. Now, when you have a piece, well, I don't know if I have that picture. Oh, no, I don't have that picture. We have some very corroded pieces, obviously, in the museum. And one of the things to remember is not to start necessarily, your first impulse probably is to flake off the corrosion. But that corrosion can leave you a very pocked and marked piece of iron, and you could lose completely the integrity of the piece. So for us, as I said, we carefully store it as is in a padded box and such. Not necessarily always practical in your home if it is something of great importance. But in that case, if it's something of great importance, it's probably worth the money to get a true conservator to look at it. One of my first jobs at the Woodstock Museum was we had a pipe that had come into us, and I had dental tools. And with the dental tools, I was carefully taking off all the rust off of the iron that was holding the pipe together. So, I mean, as I said, if you're going to remove layers of rust, do it very carefully. As I said, the tiny dental tools is what they had us doing it with. Now, silver obviously is more likely for you to have pieces in your own home. And the one thing about silver is, again, those commercially available products, they're not always the best way to go. There are the liquid ones you can get, and there are also, I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm not sure of the brand name, but they're basically pieces of wool that are infused with the silver polish, and you would pull off a little bit of this infused wool and polish with. If anyone's ever used those products, the wool infused one, choose the liquid over the wool infused one. The liquid, again, you have control over. You pick the cloth. You can pick a less abrasive method of applying the silver. And so you put just a little bit on, again, and work in small circles in a little tiny corner before you move on. Now, one of the things is to take care not to leave buildups of the silver polish in any grooves or indents in any of your silver pieces, because that will continue to eat away. A lot of those cases, that silver was engraved and that tarnish was artificially put there to bring out that engraving. And so those are things that you want to maintain and not polish away that tarnish. Things that are silver plated, you have to take especially care with, because if you polish it too much, you're going to start to wear away that plating. Especially commercial dips. Should never use a commercial dip, especially for plated things, because it's just going to eat away at that silver. Because every time you polish, you take that and get rid of that tarnish, you get a little bit of the silver going away. Tarnish in itself is not harmful to silver. It's just a reaction between the silver and the oxygen. It's not harmful at all, it just is aesthetics. So the same can be said for any other metal polishes out there. You need to be careful, work in small little areas. Copper and brass, again, is aesthetics. And most of those, the patina, the natural patina, gives it value and shouldn't be polished in the first place. So you can get that anti-tarnish fabric that you can store your things in. That's perfectly fine. We also do something as simple as the salt cellar actually lives inside an acid-free tissue wrapped and then inside a plastic bag that's tied shut. It's just limiting the amount of oxygen that's getting to it, and limiting the amount of tarnish that it's going to create. Sort of the exception to the rule when it comes to metal polishing is coins. Never use metal polish on coins. They're a completely specialized field on their own, and I'm sure if any of you are coin collectors, you know that. You can, again, take a brush and brush off any dirt. You can take a bit of distilled water and wash off any dirt and let them air dry. But whenever you're not sure of the method of cleaning, ask someone. I have to ask lots of people all the time. Just because, this is my job doesn't mean I always know the best method. And I just wanted to show you some of our storage containers that we use for a lot of our smaller items. These are acid-free boxes. We isolate individual things, wrap them in tissue, put them in their own box. They all have their number on them. We all know where they are based upon their number. Now, textiles is probably something you're more likely to have in your home. Before you start any sort of washing process with any textile, just like before you do anything with your own modern clothes, test the color fastness. Find an inconspicuous spot, take a white piece of cloth that's a bit damp and rub the fabric. If any color comes off, don't proceed. There is, in conservation catalogs, a product called WA paste or Orvis paste that we use to wash fabrics. Technically, the technical term is it's an anionic detergent. So it's a very gentle detergent, more so than any Zero or any other delicates that you can get in a normal grocery store. It is a general overall cleaner, not for difficult stains. And the funny thing is, when I first finished my schooling, I went to buy some of this Orvis paste. Wasn't available in any catalogs at museum conservation stores. I actually got it at a veterinarian store. They use it to wash the sheep. So what's good for the sheep is good for our clothing that are our antiques and what we're trying to preserve. Again, use distilled water that's cold or at room temperature. Dissolve a bit of the Orvis paste in it, and it's a matter of washing, rinsing, and I mean, I'm not talking agitation the way you would your modern clothes. It's more of a gentle patting to agitate. And then the key is also to lie it flat to dry. If it happens to have a lace, if you have it on some sort of board, that you can pin the lace in place to prevent the lace from becoming disformed as it dries naturally. And any other delicate pieces that have sort of work like that, you should pin them in place so that they can dry a bit better. Now, if you have something more like this, the stitchery, if you have upholstery, if you have a stuffed animal that you needed to clean, one of the best methods is, again, your brush, a nice soft bristle brush. Brush the dirt off of it, and you can also brush it to a low suction vacuum. You can buy low suction vacuums, but the other thing you can do is take a normal vacuum hose, put a cheesecloth over the end, tie it in place, and then you don't necessarily vacuum, put the vacuum straight to the piece, but if you hold it near the piece and brush towards the piece, the good thing about the cheesecloth is it lowers the suction, yes, but it also will catch anything should, let's say, you accidentally brush the eye off. It's not going to disappear into your vacuum. Same with beads or anything like that, although I probably wouldn't use a vacuum on a beaded piece quite the same. I've never had the pleasure of washing a beaded piece like that. Now, for storage of textiles, what we do is we use something called padded hangers. So you can either make your own padded hangers, which is what we did a lot in the past, unbleached cotton and cotton batting over a very structurally sound hanger. You can now buy padded hangers. So basically a quilted piece here. It's not quite as flush as the ones we made ourselves. But what it does is, you know, like any of your clothing at home, it prevents that crease on the shoulder, it gives it some support. And we only hang things that can support themselves from the shoulder. Anything heavily beaded, like that dress in the previous slide, it was hanging for the picture only. It is stored in one of these fabric textile boxes, acid-free, and anytime any fold is made, that fold is padded with acid-free tissue so that it's a nice gentle fold rather than a harsh crease.
And there would only be one garment in each box?
That's the ideal. That's the ideal. You know, it's not always practical, and in some cases we have had to double up. We're very short on space, but so are most people's homes. And you know, you just have to be extra careful in adding extra support to that lower one, or making sure the lower one fits in the space properly and has no folds that are going to be pushed down upon.
Those folds are hangers. Is that something that you get out of those books?
Yes, we just recently bought those padded hangers from Carl McLean. I hadn't looked at any of the other ones. One of my last slides is some of the supply places that we get things from. But Carl McLean is a Canadian company.
Is there anything inside the box to absorb any kind of odor or, you know,
No.
after a period of time when these boxes, they sometimes, you know, will deteriorate just by themselves? Like, is there anything?
No, we just keep them acid-free tissue around them. We've not had any, I've not noticed any of our stuff having those sort of issues. But then again, most of the things that come to us have probably been hanging in someone's closet for, you know, 25, 30 years already that has been airing. So they're not necessarily garments that have come off of a person and immediately into a box. Let's say like a wedding gown often has. People immediately put it away, and so you have that staining of sweat and other things that are happening. So most of the things that we're dealing with have been well aired before they come into our boxes. If there were issues with, let's say, moisture, you can add silica gel, those little packets of silica gel. I don't know that that would do much for odor, but it would definitely help deal with moisture.
We have some old artifacts, like World War I, you know,
Musty.
outfits and stuff like that, that's musty, you
Mhm.
know, and trying to eliminate some of that smell, some of that odor.
Right.
I just
Right.
wondered if you did anything.
Yeah, no, as I said, I mean, for our military stuff, it's generally all hung, rather than in an enclosed box. More of a space thing for us than anything. But in most cases, those wool uniforms are very stable. If they're not stable and you had to store them in a box, you know, I'm sure we could find something, and you're welcome to take my card, and I can definitely look into that. Now, I'm sure a lot of you also have quilts. That seems to be another sort of popular piece that people have in their homes. The ideal for quilts, obviously, is to have them on a bed. But that, again, is not also practical. The next sort of ideal is to roll it. Again, not practical necessarily for the home. And so the next thing is, if you're folding it, one of the little tips that I was given as a student is, you know, you always fold things in half, and half, and half, and half, right? When you're folding your laundry, switch it up and fold them in thirds. You're changing up where the stress of the fold is on any of your things that you're folding. And again, pad that fold so that you're doing a nice gentle fold rather than a crease. This is just a close-up of the sort of homemade padded hanger. And I actually have printed out a copy of instructions for the homemade padded hanger. So if you didn't feel like buying them and you were, very good with the needle and thread, there are instructions that you can download off the internet for making them yourself. And then for all of our hanging garments, unbleached cotton, just as a dust cover over them. And then for anything that has some sort of form to it, when it comes to textiles, this athletic shoe, we have cotton batting stuck into it so it retains its shape rather than going flat. This headband hat has a foam in it so that it's going to retain its shape. Now for paintings are actually really easy. Don't do anything yourself. Really, if you have an old painting, I would never touch it. I would never trust myself with an old painting. There's just so many ways it can go wrong, and there are professionals that they have beautiful skill not only in conservation, but in painting and infilling, and they can match the technique and everything perfectly. And we're lucky enough to have one in London, so not far away. And for storage of paintings, the best storage for a painting is on the wall. However, not above a fireplace and not on an outside wall. Those are places where you're going to have fluctuations in temperature. That if it's a truly old, valuable painting, it's probably best not to expose them to the fluctuation of a fire or even the potential of smoke damage if your flue isn't open properly. For us at the museum, obviously we can't put all of our paintings up on the wall, so we've created vertical storage so that they're vaguely in the way that they would be if they were hanging on the wall.
So you suggest staying rather than turning them upside down?
Yeah, in a way it maximizes our space in part. I mean, if the frame is fragile, for example this one, we do not stand it upright. It lays flat in a box.
But if you put the painting up or the painting down? Because I was always taught the painting had to go down and the backside stay up.
Well, as you can see down here on the bottom, it is face down. Any of the ones that we do have, there's that one that's too large to go in, it is face down. The ones that are stored, if there's more than one in a section, they are not, the wire is nowhere near the painting or even the glass, so that there's no chance of scratching. And the ideal is an interleaving of some sort of foam in between them. We have a photograph collection of now, what are we looking at? Over 5,000 images in our collection. And I say images now because so many of them are now coming in digitally, of course. We do have a lot of originals. But for every single picture that we have an original for, it goes into its own acid-free file folder, and then we have them numbered numerically, and then they go into an acid-free box. And then you can see the entire shelf lined with them there. Again, sort of like paintings with photographs, I'm in the camp of don't try anything yourself for the most part. If it's water damaged at all, if it's ripped, just try to support it. For us, we do scanning. Again, it's a case of, like I said, we take photographs before, during, and after treatment. If you have a photograph that's ripped, bent, anything torn, scan it. Preserve the original, work with the digital copy or a print that you make. And I would also suggest that if you are getting things printed, print them at a professional photography place, Blacks, any of your grocery stores that have a photo lab, much better. Those will last much longer than the one you can print off from your own color printer. Their technique, their chemicals, much longer in longevity than your own printer. Now, I know a lot of you probably have from, the 50s and 60s, those, what they call magnetic albums. I have a few of them in my family too. Now, obviously we know they're not the best, but if they're not drying out and the picture's lifting naturally, it is often best just to leave them where they are, rather than trying to remove them. Again, scan them, make a copy of them, but don't try to force them. And that's the same for anything that has a backing or any other support. Just try to leave them on their support. Don't try to remove them, because just the chance of damaging is just way too great. And then of course, the preferred materials for your sleeves, uncoated polyethylene, polyester, or acid-free enclosures, stay away. And I don't even know if they make them anymore, the polyvinyl chloride ones. So PVC, bad, polyethylene, good. So again, photographs are another really good place to use gloves. Hold them by the edges, support any back. You can write on them with soft leaded pencils, but of course, if it's, let's say, from the 70s, 80s, they have that plastic coating on the back and you really can't write on them with a soft lead pencil. You can always do what we do at the museum, and we have a copy that we write on, and the copy and the pictures stay together in the photo. It also allows you to draw a line to someone's head and write their name, rather than looking at the back and going, well, the name's right here, does that mean that guy? So if you have a copy that you can write on, sometimes more beneficial. If you have cased images, such as daguerreotypes or ambrotypes, again, don't remove them from their case. Leave them as is, store them as a three-dimensional artifact in a box with some padding. And of course, you probably all know this already, don't use Scotch tape, cellophane tape, any pressure-sensitive tape. Those are sort of evil. In regards to books, for our oldest or most fragile books, we create book enclosures. So basically, we create a support for them, acid-free paper or cardboard, and then just Velcro held in place. So we do it simply as it's 2 sheets. When I was in school, they made us cut out of 1 sheet, but which is more economical, but this is much easier. And it's just a matter of measuring how thick your spine is, how big your cover is. And again, Karma Quain sells this paper, this cardboard, that already has sort of indented folds, so it makes it rather easy to do. Books are designed to sit upright on a shelf like this. This is how they best take the stress. Larger books, however, you can see on the bottom, are okay to lie horizontally, as long as they're not stacked more than 2 or 3, and if they have something in between them, just as an interleaving. You'll also notice those larger books on the bottom have a tie around them. They're a bit too large, really, to economically do a book enclosure for them, and so you use a cotton twill tie to hold the spine really in place, because the spines are almost completely off. So again, like the paintings, if you have a bookshelf on an outer wall, it is not the place for your oldest, most cherished books, because of that fluctuating temperature that that outer wall can have. Now, when opening any of these old books, you can buy a book cradle, like we use for display, you can see on this side, or you can buy a book pillow if the book is very valuable. But simply at home, you can take 2 towels and roll them and use them as support on either side of the book. Because books are meant to be read, So you shouldn't be afraid to do that. Now for documents, you treat them pretty much the same way as you would your photographs. Again, suggesting scanning them. This one in particular is a parchment document, land deed, that we took to a professional conservator and had this enclosure made for them because it's parchment and because of the age of it. So it's parchment being, not parchment paper, but parchment being the skin from an animal that they then stretched and treated and then wrote on. And again, we took it to a professional conservator. It was well beyond our skill set. And again, Scotch tape is bad, but there are document repair tapes that are acid-free that you can buy from these catalogs that are okay for small tears in documents. I would use them on the underside of the documents, not necessarily on the side where there's writing. We've used them on maps and such at the museum. In school, they taught us to tear Japanese paper and to create your own weak glue paste to repair them. But these document repair tapes that you can buy commercially are the next best thing. And then for newspapers, the best thing is to lay them flat. We have newspapers in the museum from 1838, and we have some from 1938. The 1938 ones are yellow, crumbling, you can barely touch them. The 1838 are beautiful, pristine, because of the rag-based paper they used in the 1800s versus the pulp-based of the 1900s. So obviously, best to store flat, although I will give you a case where a newspaper was rolled, which is much better than folding it. Because again, like the quilts, that crease obviously is where the damage is going to occur. If you roll it, yes, it may be harder to read it, but then you have no crease. So sometimes, there have been some situations where the rolling, it wasn't bad. If you can't lie it flat, rolling wasn't terrible. Although probably newspapers from the 30s, 20s, and 30s probably can't take rolling either. They're just so crumbly that they really don't stand much of a chance. We have boxes of them, and I have no clue how to index them because you can't touch them.
Are they microfilmed yet?
Oh yeah, these ones are all microfilmed, yeah. So we have them more for the advertisements and display purposes than the information they contain.
Hello.
Mhm.
What if you iron them to get the creases out?
Well, it's not so much the creases that are the issue, it's just they're crumbling.
No, that's not what I mean. I ironed mine.
Oh, you ironed those? Oh, you did iron. What was?
And they turned out beautiful. Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Well, did you have something in between the paper and the iron?
No.
Okay, that would be probably, if you did do that, I've never heard of that before, but I would always have something in between if you were going to try it. And again, before you undertake anything, I would try taking a photograph of it, scanning it just in case. That's sort of my caveat for anything. Try to photocopy, scan, take a picture of before you try anything. We do have a lot of single sheets of newspapers and our map collection, which we have encapsulated. Have any of you heard of encapsulation before?
Yes.
Okay. So, to most people, it looks like lamination, right? It's in a plastic coating, but it is actually in between the two pieces of Mylar, but there is no heat involved. It is just sealed, in this case, with double-sided tape around the edge with holes left open so that there's breathability happening. And again, reversible. Lamination, not reversible, involves heat. So in this case, I can now handle this document without getting my fingerprints all over it because I have encapsulated it. I can actually pass it around if you want to see it.
With weather around something like that, are you able to photocopy it?
We can, for the most part, photocopy it. We've had some issues with are larger maps that are encapsulated going through the large blueprint scanners because of more so not only the glare, but the air pockets it creates because they go through a set of rollers. We have now just gotten a very large scanner at the museum. So that will be less of an issue now. You know, generally, it's pieces of the map that people are more interested in rather than reproducing the entire thing. And, you know, for us, we display them pretty much in their encapsulated state if we do. So, you know, we're generally able, that's the good thing about encapsulation is we can, you know, you carefully put a slit, pull it out if the glare is an issue. However, you will notice up here, some of our maps are still too large to be encapsulated and put into the flat storage, so we do roll them. Rolling again, we're preventing those creases. Now, just a few quick words on digital. I'm in no way a digital expert. And the museum has our issues as much as anyone with, you know, we would prefer an original be donated to us, but most people are now aware of originals being, you know, personal property and valuable for the family to preserve. So we happily take scans of photographs and add them to the museum's collection in that format. And so we are getting quite a large digital collection. We've tried to create standards so that everything is scanned the same way. We have a naming convention, so everything's named in the same way. We're collecting the same information. And that's part of digital preservation, is you do have to be very organized. You know, all with your digital cameras, you take 50 pictures and maybe only 5 of them are ones you really want. Get rid of the other ones, don't keep them. They're just going to confuse matters. Keep the ones you want to keep. Don't clutter up your life with all the other ones. In more ways than one, that's good practice. So then the other thing is, we sort of advocate, if you really love the picture, print it out. Again, go to a store that has the appropriate methods for printing out digital pictures, not just on your home computer. That's going to be one way of preserving the picture. There's also sort of the way of thinking of 3, 2, 1. So you make 3 copies of the digital file, save at least 2 of them in different types of media. So save one on a hard drive, save one to a CD, save one to a USB, pick a different method. And then save one in a different geographical location. So give one to your daughter. Here's a copy of all of my pictures. I don't know how the cloud fits into this, whether the cloud is considered a different geographical location or not. Not sure. And then they suggest that you should look at these digital pictures at least once a year. I don't know who has time to do that. But that's what they suggest, so that every year you should go back and make sure that your file hasn't been corrupt. And then, this is the best, every 5 years, you should save it onto a new media type. That's especially important if you have old floppy disks still. I have the even older generation of floppy disks with GEDs, yeah, the really floppy ones with genealogical information on it. That's completely lost to me now because it was never transferred at each time a new technology came along. You know, there's not machines necessarily out there to read some of these older technologies anymore. So try to be diligent to switch it up every single time something new comes along. So again, as I've been saying, if ever in doubt, contact, well, you can always try calling me first at the museum, or the Chatham Kent Museum. I'm sure any of the museums would be happy to help. But there is also online a list of conservators that are registered with the Canadian Association of Professional Conservators. There is a list. and what they specialized in and where they're located. Unfortunately, not many are in this region, but if you're willing to send your stuff to Ottawa, there's a large number obviously in Ottawa, there's also a lot in Toronto. There's an organization called Canadian Conservation Institute, CCI. They're basically my go-to people, especially when it comes to new products. When a new product comes out or a new method comes out, if they say it's okay, then I'll do it. They produce this sort of Bible called the CCI Notes. And probably up until about 2 years ago, you had to buy each note in it. It's now available free. You go to CCI, their website, and along the side it goes CCI Notes. And in it, there's a note here for cleaning glass and acrylic display cases. There's one about care of basketry, care of quill work. They have a different note for some of the most obscure types of things that you can possibly find. They have written about it. How to deal with mold growth in textiles. So they're a really great resource. Some of the things may be out of your league once you do read the note, but at least you've read it and you know a lot of the things they deal with are out of my league. And then I send it off. And then there is also the American Institute of Conservation, and they have a really great thing on their website, which is general public. It's a place where any articles written about how to take care of your own artifacts have been listed. So it's another great online resource. The products we get, for the most part, come from Carmaclean. There is also 2 other sort of catalogs. Gaylord and University Products, they're both American companies. They have Canadian distributors. Gaylord, I'm not sure if they're a Canadian distributor, but for University Products, it is this company called Lines and Curves. And anything you see on the University Products website, Lines and Curves can get you. They are sometimes the exact same materials. In some cases, some of the things that I can get at Lines and Curves, I can't get at Carmaclean and vice versa. So, you just have to look at both. And difference in prices generally isn't that much, but you can make those decisions for yourself. The one thing I think Carmaclean has going for it, and probably a lot of you have already dealt with this, is they are now creating kits for the home use. So rather than buying 20 boxes, they will sell you 1 box. Instead of buying a roll of Mylar, they will sell you a few sheets of Mylar and all the things you need to do your encapsulation, just in a small home version rather than the bulk that we get at the museum. Just before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to say that the catalogs are up here if you wanted to take a look. You're also welcome to look at the CCI notes. And then I've also put at the front table our brochure for the Windsor Community Museum. There's also a list of some of the sources we have in our resource area, as well as our fee schedule. There is also a poster for an event we're having on May 24th. Christine Woodcock, who is a genealogist who specializes in Scottish genealogy, will be coming to speak at the museum on the 24th. And so there's a poster there in regards to that. I think that's everything I have back there. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to help you. And if I don't know it, I'll find out. For Keith Bantock, he is a wonderful painting conservator.
Is that like B-A-N?
B-A-N-T-O-C-K. And I believe he is still has an office in Museum London in their basement. Yeah, he's wonderful.
You were just talking about the rolling. My grandmother gave me this rolled up, here, take this with your family tree. And I'm like, what's that? That's your great grandfather. It was a picture, it was a 3-foot long picture of the Heinz employees.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's been rolled for so long that we can't even unroll it. And we tried to and it started cracked, so I'd have to send that away, obviously, and get it
I definitely
undone
would.
and framed and.
And unfortunately, that's one of the situations where you can't even scan it before you send it away. But by sending it to a professional conservator, they will, again, photograph it at every stage to preserve that documentation.
I had some work done by Keith Bantock, and he took a picture before and a middle and after and put it on a CD, and I got it when I picked my stuff up.
Exactly. And he's very meticulous in recording things. For work that he's done for us, he picks out details that he's afraid, if he starts in touching, that he might lose, so he'll take a photograph of it before he ever touches it.
Heather, on behalf of the Essex branch of the OGS, thank you so much for such a comprehensive presentation about how to preserve artifacts and documents. I think watching the attention, everybody was very much, I think, engaged here, and I think they're also thinking of things in their own household. Oh, this is what I have to do with this and that and so on. So, thank you very much for it, appreciate it.